like to introduce your host for this evening. He's a security consultant and advisor. He's an author, a broadcaster now, and he's got a book coming out, which I'm sure he'll wave at the screen at some point, as is obligatory. But also, he comes from a line of security professionals. His mother and father were in the business themselves many years ago. So it's quite surprising that him and his sister aren't called Alice and Bob. I present to you James Ball. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, with the introduction done, some of you will know this, some of you won't. The way this is going to work, very interactive, very freeform. When you're doing a generic tabletop scenario like this, where you've not got planning, you've not got a real organisation to work with, you have to go a bit loose on the details, otherwise you're going to go down rabbit holes and spend ages on it. So if at any point I gloss over things that you think would happen in reality, or wouldn't, that's why. In a real one, you would be sitting down with an organisation for anything up to a few hours beforehand to weeks and weeks of preparation to prepare these scenarios, depending on the depth they want to go to, the scope you want to cover, how much realism you want, whether you want it to be for the technical team, for the management team, HR, comms team, whoever it might be, or everyone altogether. Now, with that said, it is a quiet week at Fobling District Council. Anyone has read or heard Garrison Keillor, you might get the reference there. Or was. Here is Fobling District Council leadership, executive board, whatever you want to call them, employees, the adoring public, and maybe someone else is around. So the calls start coming in on Tuesday morning as soon as the phone lines open. Bins haven't been picked up, and when people try to report them, they're not getting notifications or confirmations. Guest parking permits, there's people trying to apply for them, nothing's working. And emails that they send in to complain about this, they're getting quite strange replies, just holding supplies, replies, typos, other bits and pieces.
Sorry, just before you carry on, one thing I should mention is that we are going to be recording this for people who couldn't make it along. So just bear that in mind when you do speak. The other thing is, for people who are watching on their screens, you're very welcome to use the chat. So some of these complaints that are coming in, feel free to raise your own complaints. You can say something positive to your local council employees as well, if that's what you feel is the appropriate thing, but I'm not sure how many positive things we'll be getting. Or there might even be a local reporter. So please do feel free to use the online buttons, and so then you can be participating yourselves as well.
Okay. So, employees of the council, you're the ones fielding these calls that are definitely coming in and in quite high volumes. Board, you'll probably be getting some notifications of them.
I mean, I'd be inclined to be in an incident room with that collection of issues across different systems. It's not just one system demoing up, is it? So, yeah.
Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. So who are you bringing into the incident room?
Cecil.
Okay. Volunteer CISO. Anyone else?
Instant manager if you've got one.
You have now.
I'll take care of comms, external and employees.
Comms and employees. And yourself?
I'll be CIO.
CIO. Okay, brilliant. So a fairly stacked instant room. And what's your first action? What is it you're going to try and look into?
We've had lots of comments coming in externally, but what are the tech teams telling us internally? Is there any sort of, outstanding instance from the weekend that we should be aware of?
No unusual outstanding instance from the weekend. It seems like last night traffic to the website stopped, but the website's not down. All of your system monitoring is saying it's up. All of your internal servers, they're up, they're active, but you're not seeming to get any traffic through them.
Are we facing a DDoS attack?
You need to set a team off investigating
Yeah.
any form of attack that might be going on. I want to start drafting a comms. But also, my question is, should we be shutting systems down? Because if the results are uncertain, is it better not to have them up? And that changes the comms I might write, which is why I'm asking the question now.
That's a decision for your incident management role.
Yeah.
And the obvious question is, have we got comms going in and out, as in tech comms rather than media comms? Because is it as simple as, you know, the pipe's gone down, for instance, and that's why you're not getting any traffic?
We would want to identify what are the systems being impacted, what are the critical services being impacted. Is this going to be expanding, or does that just stop within the system? So what are the systems related to bin management? And people who own that system, we got to interview them to identify their latest patches being done or invasion.
So no updates, no maintenance windows, no unusual activity. The way that that one actually works, you have an API which sits on your main website, your main domain, and interfaces with the contractors who do the collection, telling them who's paid for their garden bin collection and who hasn't. The other bins they just pick up as normal. And you've got complaints coming in that the garden bins have not been collected.
Okay, at this point, I think from the comms side, I definitely need to put something on our website and whatever other methods we have to say we acknowledge there's a problem and we're working on it. So at least we go public with that, because we don't get know any more. How long before we do hear about whether there's anything wrong with the pipes or the comms?
Fairly quickly, because when you put the message on the website, when you push the update to it, it doesn't update. There is no change to the live website.
We're not in charge of it.
You still have the control of the web server responsible for that.
You have control of the web server, it's just not getting any traffic.
So I'm thinking of DDoS attack here. Can't respond to.
I'm just wondering if,
As though the people aren't able to log in.
One second.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm just wondering, it's quite complex and multi-layered. So I would imagine there would be a framework that someone would have in the event that something like this happened. So which means that what's being discussed should be able to be captured and populated in that framework.
You are correct that that should be the case. Sadly, Fobling, with the recent change of leadership and quite a lot of turnover in staff, have lost some of their processes, lost their institutional memory of those. There may well be documentation about that framework somewhere in your SharePoint, but there's not anyone who remembers it.
Oops.
Can we get to the SharePoint?
Yes, SharePoint is up and running currently.
So internally, systems are up. Externally, looking in, we're not seeing what we should be seeing, because we're doing updates of the website and they're not being reflected from the external, from customers.
Do we reach out to the internet provider? Is that a good step now?
Yeah, I still think that
Yeah.
the systems have been overloaded with requests and unable to process the request to serve. Yeah.
Have we got evidence of that? Or can we ask the ISP, internet service provider, why we're not getting traffic?
ISP says that connectivity is absolutely fine.
Yeah.
It's not so much we're not getting traffic, it's the fact that changes are not being reflected on the live site. So we potentially have got traffic, we're just not seeing it, are we? So something's been spoofed.
Yeah. Is there any message coming up when we try to access the system saying something like is it forbidden or the server cannot accept any more requests?
No, when you access your secure internal interface, which is the only way to write changes to the site, everything looks fine, everything looks normal, you're just not getting any traffic to it from external. And when you look at it externally, any changes you make are not being reflected.
Are we getting traffic going in and out? Can we make phone calls on our IP phones? Can we communicate with the outside world normally?
Your IP phones, your Teams phones, because everyone loves Teams, are working fine.
Okay,
So if I'm in the instant room, if I type in bbc.co.uk, do I see a live feed from BBC?
You do, you get a fairly quick live feed.
Yeah.
So it's
It's just our systems connected to external network, it's not exchanging data.
traffic to our website being directed to a different server.
You are not seeing any traffic to your website.
It must be because, so can we now go have someone outside our network, one of our people, do a trace of going into our website to see where it's getting to?
Yeah.
So that's something we can
DNS
do.
lookup to find out where it's actually physically going to.
So DNS lookup. The domain name is registered to a probably fictional company based somewhere in some other country, having been renewed yesterday.
Yeah.
And is pointing elsewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's the domain takeover then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, so we need to reach out to someone like Akin to get get control of the DNS entry and get that pointing back to our internal servers potentially, sort of thing. So we probably have to find internal records to prove that we own that domain in order to get it transferred back to us.
You don't own that domain. It expired last night. at
Yeah,
midnight.
that we did, so that we did own that domain, yeah.
Can we quickly set up some temporary link so that whoever lives in that residential area can still use our service from the new website? And then we figure out a long-term name.
Yeah, so you can get a temporary domain name set up and running so that at least your site is available.
Then
Yeah,
we can use.
At
the
least put a
funds.
message up that says, we know
Yeah.
things are down and we're putting things back.
Yeah.
Yeah,
How are you going to tell people to go to that new website?
so you're a council, so physically people, there are centres of communication, there's libraries, there's schools. Frankly, I'm hoping you might have WhatsApp groups or something for some of the groups you work with. So you can have to use methods that are not on your website.
Also get in touch with the local media.
Media,
Yeah.
absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah.
Radio stations,
Press, yeah, radio, yeah. We're going to use methods like that. If we've got email lists, we could take them out of our network and then use them to broadcast to people.
so as the comms manager, what do you feel like saying to your local radio station?
Okay, so we're aware we have a problem with our systems at the moment. I probably won't say at the moment what we think it is for various reasons, but so we actually know we have a problem. Don't use our services right now. We're setting up a new page and I'll give the address of that, whatever that'll look like. And follow the instructions on that page, which we will update as we put more services available or we recover service.
So-
Okay, I just wondered, would you be communicating to any other stakeholder in parallel? Because remember, you have those internal stakeholders that are critical.
Absolutely, we've got,
The employees want to know what's happening.
Yeah.
yes. And to be assured they're going to get paid because that's kind of, if this thing runs on, people are going to be very keen on that. And I think you're obliged, if you're hacked, aren't we obliged to tell at least one body about that? To say we think we've been hacked in this way.
Your Office 365 just went down. Email, Teams, SharePoint,
Okay.
documentation, file stores, OneDrive, MDM, everything is now unavailable.
Everything related to Microsoft or other apps?
Everything related to Office 365.
Which is based around your domain name anyway, isn't it? So I'm surprised that that hadn't gone down initially.
Everyone is now getting, when they try to log in, that their password is wrong. Doesn't matter what they try, anything else. And password resets of self-service ones appear to be disabled by someone.
You got to contact Microsoft partner
Yeah.
team right away. Helping to rectify the situation, and then usually comes into my phone. Maybe text messages, WhatsApp.
I think we may have to start using WhatsApp or something like that, start having groups of that like us and all the employees. Because that works. and separate to the networks.
And informing them in group chats not to pass around sensitive information because of the encryption.
Your HR system is also in SharePoint. So all of your employee records, all of your contact records are in there. When you contact Microsoft, they say, absolutely no problem, this happens. Can you prove you own the domain? We need to check that you are who you say you are.
And we start looking for paper records of actually the purchases to actually to say that you purchased a domain. Revert back to paper a little bit. And then that can use that as your proof.
And I think in the local government council put us in a better place to kind of prove that. I think being where private company might be taking longer, so.
So worth noting at this point, emergency GP bookings are down.
Disaster recovery systems somewhere else that we can.
Have a process for disaster recovery, it's in the SharePoint.
All of which we can't get to.
I just wondered, how are you going to address the actual end user, the customer, for instance, that who wants that GP appointment? Because there'll be panic out there. And those are the customers. So how are we going to make sure that, reassure them that we're doing something to?
Partly, I think we also, coming from what you're saying, partly I don't think we've contacted yet or spoke about is the police sort of thing. Because, you know, if it's GPs and that, it could be sort of like, sort of affecting, you know, life and everything like that. So perhaps the emergency services do need to be contacted so they can field any calls on that.
So for your comms people, you will still have access to your social media accounts currently.
Okay, so
It's worth noting.
we can get stuff out on there.
Yeah.
And maybe we can tell the GPs, look, they need to put in place some kind of paper and phone system because this is down. So they can start to reach out to people. I do feel we're out of our depth. As a local council, we're pretty not qualified to face what we're facing. So if there's somebody we can reach out to, I don't know if there's something attached to the national body of councils or something. I suggest we do that.
Yeah.
So that would be getting NCSC to come in
Okay.
effectively.
Yeah.
For the GPs, they do have DR systems.
Right.
They're not, or rather business continuity. So they'll get the forms out, they do everything by paper. It would be slower. Possibly. Let's not get into NHS IT. Might be slower, might be less efficient, but you can at least call in and book appointments once you've got the word out to GPs. So that's sorted. NCS.
Another tweet from Matt Philpott who says, I'd have thought the council would have had a plan for this kind of thing. I guess we'll be paying for their mistakes through our council tax. That's what happens when you go to Twitter. You see lovely comments like that.
Yeah, and when I have time to read that stuff, I will, but I think we're going to try and focus on the root problem right now.
So you are getting media attention as well.
Yeah.
Obviously, you're doing some comms out to them, but you're going to be getting the negative headlines. You're going to be getting things like that picked up and quoted on local radio. You're going to be getting these issues popping up.
So if we haven't already told the schools, we obviously have to tell the schools and they'll have to use, again, whatever backup methods they have to allocate food to children.
Their backup method is either give it to all the children.
Yeah.
In which case you will be paying for that, or that's about it. Because they've got no way of checking who's enrolled and who isn't without your systems.
Yeah.
Just
We're going to pay.
So if we've got access internally to the systems, but it's just the external facing we've got an issue. The lifts off, get them sent out in taxis or whatever, that sort of thing. Start going a little bit old school on things.
That would work. You do have that internal access to them, so you can get those lists and courier them out if you have to.
And also, I think the issue has been escalated. First of all, we were talking about spoofing of our website, so we weren't seeing any traffic. But now we're sort of saying that systems are not accessible and it's only about wrong passwords, that almost seems like someone has been able to get a password reset done and get into the system now. And now that the aggressor is actually working internally rather than externally. So if we did have any threat escalation, I think it's gone up a couple of levels.
So you do have a message which comes in through the call centre, which gets escalated up pretty much directly to the incident room. This is anonymous. We have crushed Fobling Council today, tomorrow the world. Pay us 25 Bitcoin or suffer your fate.
And NCSC come back to us yet? Have we got?
They will be shipping out consultants at this point. It's still going to take a good few hours. You're not that near Cheltenham.
Yeah.
Or London.
Kind of
Yes, but a restore hasn't made any. We still don't really know how many systems are affected yet. So how do we know what to restore? That's the problem we got, I think.
One of our first step was identify what are the systems impacted.
Yeah.
So we should have that, you know?
So systems impacted, anything which is interfacing with your council website. So that's anything where you've got a government API, which has to then interact with your council website. Anything where it's going directly through that. So that's your council tax, that's your parking permits, that's your payment for bins, brown bins, depending on your area. Everything like that goes through there.
So you're immediately contacting all those different vendors, suppliers, companies that's involved, letting them know of, we are planning to resolve this. What are your business continuity plans? Bring it on.
Okay, so most of your contract partners will come back and say, well, we don't have them because our processes are fine. It's the notification from you we're not getting.
So who controls the API?
You do.
Yeah.
It's on your servers.
I think there's a couple of things. We got the ransom note, which my suggestion is we don't intend to pay it, but we don't tell them that yet, so that they have an interest in, letting us carry on. Yeah. And I think we should be making a list now of the services we provide that are down and working out which ones we have to get some kind of replacement in place, in which order. Yeah, so the ones that are health affecting, major services, minor services, that kind of thing.
Also, do we need to shut off the external connection? Have we done that yet? Because if they've said that they're now running internally or connected internally, then shut off the connection. I know it's a simple thing to sort of say, and it's probably a lot more involved, but
So your internal website is currently accessible externally under a temporary domain name. If you shut off the connection, that will no longer be accessible. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm saying decide and work out which way you want to go on that.
yeah.
well, I think I'd rather have things not picked up and have working systems than have all of the systems potentially wiped internally.
Yeah. I think we'll
So
have-
I think that you put out the position that put out some sort of comms to sort of say we're down at the moment,
Yeah.
cut off the connection.
Yeah.
Gives us the time to get the consultants in so they can do the bit. There's a bit of a holding position. We haven't told the aggressors what we're gonna do, Don't want to show too many of our cards.
We think they're in, so we've got to shut
Yeah.
off the connection.
Yeah.
I think that's right, and I think we can even buy another domain name temporarily and tell people by the methods we described, use that one, that's where we're gonna put the landing page. But the main one's got to be down because we want to pull the plug on our data center.
Registrar, by the way, have come back and they've said, yes, we understand what's going on. We will get it restored to you within 24 hours.
Okay, so we'll take 24 hours of not having I think we still pull
I
the
think we
plug.
can manage with our, yeah.
Yeah, you've still got to pull the plug until, at least then you've got a point where you know when you can turn it back on, sort of thing.
Have we spoken with our relevant business unit leads and technology leads to identify, can we switch it off and down? And what's their recommendation of rectifying the situation?
So that depends on the system. For example, the garden bin payment system, yeah, you can shut that off immediately. The GP booking system, well, that's fairly delicate. It's quite a legacy system. It has to interact with actually a couple of trusts because you cover a couple of areas. And so it's fragile. You could shut it down. They're not sure what the impact would be. All of the payment processing systems that you do, those can just be shut down instantly because they're all going to external sources. They just collect the financial data, the card data, the bank account numbers, and forward it on appropriately.
There's a call coming to the service desk from Microsoft. So somebody says, yes, this is Dave from Microsoft. We understand that you've got some problems with your computers. Would you like to share your screen so that we can help you through this problem?
Why are they not?
Or you on the security consultant so they can track where he's
Yeah,
coming
no
from.
way, yeah, I think that's probably coming from the malicious user
Yeah.
anyway, yeah. So no way.
Okay.
My concern is that everything you've said appears to be not necessarily the applications down, but the ability to get to them is down because people's registrations are incorrect. The radius server or whatever it is at the front end that gives you authorization is incorrect for some reason. That's what it looks like to me.
So firstly, your authentication to Office 365 is still broken. However, Microsoft are now taking a bit more action on it, having heard from NCSC and ICANN, the domain compromise issue, have said that they will start investigating. Secondly, one thing that has been noted about your website is all of the logins are gone. As in, there are no longer any login pages, any login requirements. It just takes you straight through to the financial data, to put in their council tax details, to put in their card details, to pay a parking fine, whatever it might be.
You mean if you're an external user, you go there and without any details, you start putting in payment details?
Yes.
I mean, how do we stop that? It's not our website that's doing it, is it? Someone else's website that's
But we
doing
can
it.
request a takedown on that site. Or take a takedown on the back end. Because I'll be basically hosted by an ISP or someone and get it dumped.
Okay. You will be able to get a takedown. It will be related to NCSC kicking in, let's say, to do it. I'm afraid you're going to lose your website. And at this point, that is actually the most you can do until you've had the 24 hour to get the domain name back, and then you're in disaster recovery mode. So, running through the actual situation, it was a DNS takeover. Someone in the chat spotted almost immediately, where your DNS record, with the confusion of the change of administration and the turnover of staff, simply slipped through the cracks. No one paid to renew the domain name. A hostile actor out there spotted that it was going to expire in a few weeks, spent some time crawling your website, cloning it as much as they could, and then when it came up for expiry, immediately jumped in, redirected it to their own site. You lost Office 365 because after some time, they managed to use proof that they had the domain to use the automated Microsoft tenant recovery and take over your tenant.
Sure.
This is a vulnerability. It does it, well, not a vulnerability, it's designed to recover it, but it only works if your domain is safe. So be aware of that. That then broke your backend comms, your documentation, a whole load of other things. Other actions you could have done. Firstly, getting those contact sheets printed out as early as possible, because at that point it was clear your systems were fragile. Radio, the snow system you picked up on, You got the comms out through your snow day system to tell people don't use the site, go to this one. We are working to recover. One thing you missed was the financial details, because that was the whole aim of it from the attacker's point of view. To just have people entering their card details, bank account details, setting up direct debits, less direct debit, but all of those
Children's money.
straight
Lunch
through.
money.
Yeah. Children's lunch money top ups. All of those things went straight through to your unknown attackers. And we've actually got another message from someone who, did put their details in. So you have your constituents being defrauded and now at risk of various financial attacks. You handled it about as well as you could. These are not designed to be scenarios that you just, oh yeah, that's fine. If you're just dealing with it, you're not getting any value and you have to step up the difficulty. So you have to adjust it to match what people are doing. And it does mean it's meant to be frustrating. It's meant to be stressful. And with things like the framework you mentioned, you would now know, right, we urgently need to get that framework in place. We urgently need to have a comms plan that's stored offline somewhere. We need these things to exist. Maybe the previous administration had them and you can pick some of those up, maybe not. But from these exercises, that's the type of thing you can find out before you have to. So that's a large part of the aim of these. It was fairly quick. You did deal with it faster than I was expecting. I think particularly when you picked up on the external site not matching the internal, that accelerated things. Hence why your lovely attacker decided to take down Office 365. Are there questions? Are there comments?
I've got one question. I was just thinking, because there are people perhaps in the leadership team who perhaps haven't had this experience before in any shape or form, and may not have the broad knowledge of what's required. It requires some soft skills for people to actually see the full picture and put the jigsaw together to move faster, more pace.
Yeah. Comms is the big thing with this. That's what makes or breaks you afterwards. It's whether you communicate it well and transparently. If you had more experience with this type of scenario, I imagine someone would have immediately gone, and it was actually mentioned a bit further on, straight to social media accounts, start getting the message out there. Right from the start, we've got something wrong, we don't know what's going on, we're investigating, please don't use our services.
Yeah.
I think that's the type of thing.
I mean, as a comment, even though this is not real, the fact that you are sitting here, questions are being asked, and then the things you can imagine in your head, what is going wrong and so on, makes you to freeze at some point thinking what could be the problem, you know, and it emphasizes the importance of having incident management plan, you know, rehearsed, stored, you know, you can easily get to it, you know what you need to do for each of these scenarios. So it can actually be crazy when you know that all these systems are done. And yeah, it's kind of scary, really.
It's also knowing what to do when you don't know what to do. So having a generic incident management plan you can use to build a playbook. Because one thing that can happen is hundreds and hundreds of very specific playbooks. And so the moment something goes wrong, someone says, right, it's scenario 72A, let's go.
No, but you don't know.
You don't.
It's a fog of war.
Yes.
It's like when a major system is down, there's not a hacking attack, you still got the fog of war. And that's why at the beginning, I didn't put the comms out on minute one, because I think just a couple of minutes, just check, is it as big as we think? Is it about to just come back anyway? And then when you realize it's that big, then comms.
Yeah.
So I believe, waiting a couple of minutes at the beginning. But I think what you're right, because you the random tweets that comes in, and you've got to have separate teams. There's a team doing the comms, totally separate to the teams that's trying to work out what's going on, so that they can do a decent job, each one. It's very hard to do both.
Yeah, I mean, ideally as well, you need to have kind of maybe steps also where you said, do we declare this as an incident or is it issue we need to fix before we go out? So you need to have that kind of criteria to kind of decide whether you call this an incident and you need to inform stakeholders and so on.
So on that note, did anyone think of contacting the ICO?
You did mention an organisation that needed to be contacted. I thought you were talking about the ICO.
Well,
there.
forgive me, because I don't work in the public sector, I don't know all the names of them,
Yeah.
but I know there's a body account that's meant to tell
There is.
when they get hacked, and
That's
yeah.
For ICO, I think you have up to 48 hours.
72 hours from the time you confirm a breach.
Yeah.
Specifically a breach of personal data,
So I guess it'd be too soon to kind of inform them at the early stage.
because you don't know if personal data was lost at that early stage. So one of the things that can happen is people inform the ICO too early. That's fine. They will just say, no, you don't need to tell us. Problem is when you inform them too late, that gets pricey.
Better early than late.
Yes.
So if you were in the shoes of deciding whether we were switching off external connection and you identify that GP system is crucial and we may not know what happens after if we switch it off, what would you recommend to do?
I would recommend having a backup business continuity plan for other ways to deal with those GP appointments and a comms plan that doesn't rely on any of your infrastructure to try and get the message out there. So notification up on GP sites, local radio, most of these things you would have because you do have the snow alert system, emergency alert system and similar. Whether you'd want to activate emergency alerts at what point is, again, it's the risk assessment.
Yeah, it's understanding whether or not it's just a router down, which is you swap the router out and you're sorted, or it's something which is malicious or whatever.
And at the beginning, that one could have been either.
For me, it was when P65 happened. I thought, hang on, there's been a time delay and now another bad thing. That sounds like human intervention. That doesn't sound like random stuff going wrong. So for me, it was that. But yeah,
So you were saying that there's no point in having 100 different scenario playbooks for specific things, but it sounds like some of the key things are around escalation points. And so there are some decision patterns that you could probably work on, that you could probably go through that would apply to lots of different scenarios. So when do we admit to the public that it's all gone wrong? Or when do we call this organisation? So those kind of things, maybe you could have, would that be effective to work those things beforehand?
That would be effective. I mean, the classic example of that, which I didn't want to do for this one because everyone always does it, is ransomware. When do we pay it or not? Do we pay it? Do we not pay it? Do we have a way to pay them? Do we have a way to check if they're a sanctioned organisation and will break international law if we pay them, which has happened. So having those discussions beforehand at the level you need to have them, and having a policy that someone much lower down in the organisation can just check and go, right, done, because your CISO is on holiday or your CIO is currently stuck on the London Underground trying to get into the office, or whoever you need to contact isn't available, having that decision or at least guidelines for it so that you've got that protection. You've got the IT admin who can go, right, I think this is bad enough, here's my evidence for it, I'm going to shut everything down, rather than having to escalate that up. But that also requires some cultural protections because they have to know that they will be protected if they made the wrong call based on good information.
but I think your point's very good about when I've seen like major incidents, not like this, but major incidents, very easily, lots of people focus on the problem and someone junior on the side is saying we should be telling the user something quite soon. So you kind of need a team of people or someone whose job is that. Maybe the process says, yeah, after 1 hour, no matter what happens, you stop and decide about comms, or after some period of time. Because if you don't force that, people's natural focus may be on solving the problem, may not be on that. And yet there's a whole bunch of people you can tell who can then do stuff for you and with you and improve their situation if you because you told them.
And the other aspect is doing exercises like this. There is no better way to prepare, unless you want to go and set fire to your data center, and I was told no fires. There is no better way to prepare than actually running through these, even if it's just once a month, once a year, more than sitting down and saying, right, what do we do if?
Yeah.
And taking that step through process so that people get used to it, used to thinking in that way, because it's a mixture of stress inoculation, which is why you bother doing things like injects, because it bothers people a lot more to see a news headline than to be told, okay, well, the local media will hear about it and will probably be saying negative things about you. Even though it's a bit of fun and quite straightforward, it does mean you consider the consequences more, naturally weight them higher. Okay. Any other questions, points, thoughts?
One question, you might find, because I'm not experienced in this, but I may have non-technical questions. So whether the scenario was remedied quick or took a bit longer, I'm thinking about the impact of that human behind the scene and how do you regain trust and re-engagement? Yeah. Like lessons learned, but not just from a technical point of view, because at the end of the day, at the end of the full cycle, they are human beings that are impacted and are very passionate about their
And there was
experience.
that, something was, came in, was that this is going to cost us more on our council tax and everything. So people are going to want to know what we're going to do to make sure it doesn't happen again, and we don't impact on council tax.
I think the point that you made about communicating early enough is actually it takes a lot of courage, and you may be concerned that you're communicating something when it's not necessary, but if you don't say anything, that's probably going to be worse.
I've actually received, my wife studies at Morley College, and she got an email from them one day saying, we've got a really bad system problem. This will come on Monday. It won't be up until Saturday. And I said, they've been hacked, because any regular problem, they'd have a backup and they'd bring it back up in a couple of days. If it's that long, and indeed, you know, Saturday, a feeble page came up with like one link on it saying, this is what we've got so far. And I'm like, they've really been hacked, because then they built their systems up again from scratch. But the early comms meant at least you knew they'd told you pretty quick, and you knew it was going to be rocky.
So there is research on this. And if you look at companies and share prices and customer reputation, the biggest differentiator if they suffer an attack is how prompt and how transparent their comms were. And the faster and the more transparent, the less damage is done to reputation and share price, and the faster it recovers.
Right.
So
I'm glad you said
comms
that,
are vital.
because I'm project management is my main thing. And when stuff goes wrong, absolutely, I believe in that, you know. But it's nice to hear it validated by data as opposed to just me thinking it's a good idea.
Just don't ask me for the exact studies, right?
No.
I think something that can feed into this is the threat intelligence, knowing what is going on in the world, and then you kind of check your system whether you are prepared if you are the next one on the line to be attacked.
So CISP came up at one point, and if it had been a different sort of attack affecting multiple councils, that would have been perfect place to go. I mean, good place to go regardless, but you'd then had the heads up that other councils were affected, or been able to tell them that you were and what was going on.
In the response afterward, would there be some validity in saying, look, we need some external body to help us get better? Partly because we didn't do a great job as a council, and partly because, as you say, external people thinking, well, why should we trust them again? It's easier for them to trust you, say, this external body who are applied, say we're now in a better place. I'd be thinking of getting someone in.
I would say yes, but be very careful about your selection of external body, because some of them may not help you, and that gets into your whole procurement, third-party risk management, that piece of things.
So we're new, that we're part of the new regime and that. So we can internally, we look to see whether or not we've got sort of procedures in place to restore system. But even before that, are we actually, have we got procedures in place to back up the system? We can start looking at those before we bring in the external people.
Well, the other one, of course, is also, do you know what systems you have?
Yeah.
I mean, first thing,
Expiry dates of all your
visibility.
domains, all that kind of thing, which is not very sexy, but
renewal dates of your
Really-
certificates.
so I suppose it's, yeah.
But yes, because there's a great tendency to think don't have to worry about storage or email anymore because it's all done by somebody else for you. But you forget that there's kind of links in the chain to that that can just take the whole thing away from you in an instant.
Will I mean, I'm not passing the buck here.
Already.
Yeah. I will say the ISP, you know, they need to kind of have a system in place where if I don't renew my domain on time, I've got a saving grace of, because that happens with some ISPs now, you know, they don't just kind of
Yeah.
Yeah, it tends to be a couple of months.
Yeah.
You would actually have had a grace period, and it was when
I
that grace
renewed it.
period started that your aggressor went, there's an opportunity here. Maybe they won't notice because I know they just had a local council election and they had some huge turnover because of a scandal. Maybe it will slip through the cracks.
Because in the grace period, the ISP will be emailing some contact email address they have,
Yes.
if someone's looking at that or not, that's the thing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
it might
that
be
person's
individual.
gone, hasn't he?
Yeah, that's the thing, so it's, the thing is, it's so plausible, I mean, I've been at big professional places and no one was looking after the expiry dates of various licenses, like thankfully it wasn't GNS name, but it,
Yeah.
and they went and you're going, dude, we can't be in that place, we can't do that, you know. It does happen.
I think the issue of expiry is the kind of major problem in some organizations, because when you look at the PKI certificates as well, you know, they don't get renewed on time because nobody's keeping track of when the certificate expires. You know, so I think all the little things look little, but you know, in the end, is they're actually very important in the scheme of things. Yeah.
If only we knew people in asset management who could look after that kind of stuff. You know, it's-
They wouldn't give me the money to implement certificates in service now, so, you know.
If this happens in the public sector, are there any key things that we would do differently?
So there will be particular authorities or regulators you would contact differently from the private sector. Ultimately, though, it is the same thing. I mean, it's the same thing that's under service management, asset management, under all of the ISO frameworks, every single one of them. And it's that plan, do, check, act. Now, if you're preparing for a disaster, tabletop exercises are part of the do. Because you don't want to be doing that in a crisis, you want to do it beforehand, but it is that same cycle.
Will you say it's a good idea if we have something for the local council as we have in private sector, where you have to show ISO certification, you have to show all these things that you have a good cybersecurity hygiene? At the moment, I don't think there's any for the local government councils to kind of do. I know recently.
I believe they have to have cyber essentials, but that's a minimum technical standard.
Okay.
And with ISO, I would say yes, but only if, or any equivalent, only if it's being applied sincerely. I'm sure anyone here who's dealt with compliance knows that there's ways to easily get the certificate without putting the work in or putting in the wrong work or without it being properly validated, which means that it has to be approached sincerely, and that's quite difficult to prove. So you have to have the right culture in place. It comes back to those soft skills. You want people to be committed and understand how important it is.
So for this scenario where we had the data breach, and you said 72 hours to report that, what about the fraud?
The fraud would go to Action Fraud, who some years ago were found not fit for purpose, and it would go into the statistics. There's about a 1% chance that there would be an investigation, a lower chance that it would lead anywhere.
They would just lose all that money.
You're home free.
Well, more likely, many of those people would be able to get the money back from banks or others, but from your point of view, you're gone. You've made your thousands at least.
Early retirement.
Lunch money. Goodies.
Oh, the Bitcoin ransom notification. That was complete red herring thrown in by someone in the chat, just sending in the message. So these things will happen as well. And it has happened that people have claimed credit for attacks and demanded payment and then just quietly shuffled off you to suffer.
So you weren't the only one in there.
If we want to learn about these different scenarios and learn how to prepare for those, what are the sources that we can, materials that we can get?
So there are case studies out there from a few companies who will actually put up their instant response. And there's also some fantastic ones where there have been court cases after the fact. So there's a certain credit reference agency where I highly recommend getting the US court investigation report into it, which goes through absolutely everything in minute detail, telling you exactly where the problems were, including having someone legal and financial in the wrong place with the wrong responsibilities. So that's definitely a good one to do. Other than that, it is something I'm working on. I do have scenario books and scenario playbooks that I'm slowly trying to release because they're useful. And there are other frameworks out there. Other people have done different things. There is no consolidated resource yet. So a lot of it is case study and experience and living through things you'd rather not live through.
Well, which is why having a go at something like this every couple of months is possibly not a bad idea, because then you'll come up with your own ideas as you go along. But I think the thing that I'm getting is it's about responsibility, and it's about whether you it's planning for that responsibility. And you know, we were talking about some of the ISO standards. Typically, you know, they'll be done by somebody who's quite low down in the chain, but really you need the senior leaders to be interested in making sure that they're not going to slip up when this actually happens.
So a key thing in ISO, again, all of the standards, but particularly 27K, it must have senior leadership sponsorship. Now that is meant to be actual active involvement and support, and that does happen. But a lot of the time where it's just, well, we're getting the certificate to meet our customer requirements, not for us, you end up with just, they've written a paragraph and signed it off. It's one of the reasons I strongly believe that getting the certificate should only be something you do. You have customers implementing the framework, however you adapt it, you can do that lot or another framework. Because if you were doing it for internal reasons to say, this is a tool, scaffolding we use to improve ourselves, before you have to external audit, who spends 3 days looking at your documents and then says, yeah, great, it's going to be a lot healthier.
I think speaking to what Cheryl was saying in terms of scenarios also, I think it's important to know who your threat actors are, and also to know what systems are critical to your working operations, and think about what could go wrong. And I mean, risk assessment is not something to be done only at the leadership level. You go to the shop floor as well to know questions about what if this doesn't work, what's the impact, and what can we do in case it happens. So yeah, I think things like that will help, in my opinion.
Yeah. And it has just been pointed out, the NCSC do have a basic but useful framework for running these, including some examples. So that's a good place to get started. And in terms of threat actors, 100%. I've run one of these for a startup where the evil actor was the office admin, because they were just not paying invoices, and then the day before everything came crashing down, skipped off to the Bahamas with all of the money. And the CFO got blamed because he was on holiday. Not a real scenario. I just want to point out, not based on real life, but it's looking at that type of thing and considering what are their motivations, what do they want. If anyone's familiar with threat modeling, this is kind of adapting threat modeling to non-technical scenarios as well. Okay, well, this was meant to take up to about an hour, and we've got a few minutes of that left, so I'm going to do the ending bits, and then I'm happy to do more discussion. So firstly, I'm James Bohr. I know that was mentioned earlier. I run a second generation family security, information and technology company. Yes, is because there's more than one of us. It's clever that way. And that's the address and email address to reach me on. And also because it's mandatory when you do a book. I do have a book coming out in a few weeks. I think it's great. It's a collection of articles I've written for 5 years with various different scenarios, things, everything from Christmas gnomes and what they have to do with drones and toothbrushes to self-driving cars and steganography. So all sorts of trivia. And if you want to grab one of those on your way out, I'd be very flattered. Beyond that.
Okay, well, so I really want to first of all thank Sam, Matt, Luke and Shai for having the courage to come up and face the music on this. You've thrown together a team who's kind of very rapidly assembled and you did really, really well to work through the scenario. You got it quicker than James was expecting, but also you really looked through the problem, tried to work things out and contributed a lot at the end. So thank you to the four of you.